Hello, everyone. My name is Giulia Carla Rossi, and I work at the British Library as curator for digital publications. And I'm joined today by Tegan Pyke, who's a PhD candidate at Cardiff Metropolitan University and a former PhD placement researcher at the British Library. And we are here today to talk about collecting interactive narratives using web archiving tools. And the New Media Writing Prize Special Collection in particular, and the challenges and lessons learned from developing it. So as you might already know, the British Library is the National Library of the UK and one of 6 legal deposit libraries in the UK and Republic of Ireland. Legal deposit doesn't just apply to print material. So in 2013, the UK non-print legal deposit regulation came into force. And since then, the UK legal deposit libraries have been collecting a variety of born digital publications, such as ebooks, e-journals, the archive web, and more. So the Emerging Formats project operates under this non-print legal deposit regulation and is a collaborative effort from all 6 UK legal deposit libraries to kind of build our capability to collect digital publication whose formats and structures are more complex than those currently in our collections. So we identified a series of characteristics to help us define what we mean by emerging formats. They are born digital publications that exist uniquely in digital form. They often consist of more than one media type. They are dependent on software, which is usually bespoke, as well as hardware in order to run. They are constituted by formats that are complex and components that might actually never standardize. They're not typically part of existing collections, even in other collecting institutions, and they're often at risk of rapid obsolescence. So our emerging formats work is supported by the tools, workflows, and resources of the UK Web Archive and the UK Web Archive team. So with the help of Linda Clark, who was our postdoctoral innovation placement for interactive fiction, we created an interactive narratives collection in the UK Web Archive. And last year, we also launched the New Media Writing Prize collection, which includes all entries that were shortlisted or won since the prize was launched in 2010. And the New Media Writing Prize is an annual award that is organized by Bournemouth University, and it celebrates innovative and interactive digital writing. In terms of collection scope, we archived the New Media Writing Prize website, as well as all web-based works that were shortlisted or won the prize, and some web-based contextual information around these publications as well. So especially when no capture was possible, maybe because the work was no longer live, or it was made of some offline components or obsolete formats, contextual information was captured and added to the collection instead. And we used a variety of tools to create the collection. The annotation and curation tool, or ACT, which is not a web crawler per se, but it facilitates curatorial tasks and was used to add metadata information, as well as check the quality of the captures. Heritrix, which is the main web crawler used by the UK Web Archive team, and it was our first choice of web crawler. Conifer and Web Recorder were used as well to patch captures whenever Heritrix encountered an issue, and they gave the best results when it came to capturing complex content like video and sound. Archiveweb.page is one of the latest tools developed by Web Recorder, and it was also used for its support of Raffle, which is a Flash player emulator, which meant that works created in Flash that are no longer supported by modern browsers could still be played when browsed through the archiveweb.page tool. In terms of access, most of the items in these collections are only available on site because of copyright restrictions. But during her placement, Tegan reviewed the quality of different captures and looked at how successful the web archiving tools we used were at capturing complex digital publications.
As Giulia just said, I went through the quality assurance process for the New Media Writing Prize collection in 2021. Now, last year it had a collection of 76 works, and these works had 970 total captured instances, which are working versions of the piece between them. And this made an average of about 13 captures per work, but the reality of this was very varied. Some could have as few as 3 captures and others could have as many as 300. So the main question here was how to define a good capture. This is more difficult than you think, as with a lot of web-based works in archives, complete isn't always possible. I put this down to 2 main reasons. The first is that most new media writing or digital literature is boutique literature. There's no standardized format shared between them, and each piece tends to be built from the ground up by either an individual creator or an artist collective. They can also utilize a range of different platforms to do this. So you could have Twitter or Instagram profiles or individual web pages or websites. There's also interactive fiction engines that are utilized, which add a different layer of complexity, as well as media players such as Adobe Flash, which reached end of life in January of 2021. There's also a range of different languages used in these pieces, the most common being HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. But how well these languages interact with each other and with the archive when they're placed in there is really dependent on the competency of the original coder. There's also the case of inherent interconnection, as I call it, which is where web-based works are designed to utilize the web as a platform. This can be via external linking, either to contextualizing sources or other works. It can be via external hosting, especially of video assets before the advent of HTML5, when a media player was encoded into the language. It was much easier then to host externally on YouTube or Vimeo and then include them in instead. There's also externally hosted fonts, for instance, Google Fonts and style sheets. So you can take a work and have captured every single element of it, but when it hits the archive, because it can't connect to external servers, it won't look the same. Newer works also have application programming interfaces and software development kits rolled into them, which allows for external communication with other servers again. And if these are placed into the isolation of an archive, it can remove integral functionality of the piece. So to remedy this, I went through the collection and tried to identify core literary elements with the idea that these would keep all of the works legible to a certain degree for users of the archive. And what I found is that all shortlisted and prize-winning entries of the New Media Writing Prize had narrative, which is the sequence of events in a piece. They had theme, which is either the subject matter or a recurring topic within the piece. And they had atmosphere, which is the mood of a piece, the emotional state it wants you to be in while reading or after reading. And retention of these 3 would allow for a work to remain consistent, even if complete wasn't possible. In print works, these core literary elements are often established via the text. If you want to invoke an atmosphere in a piece, for instance, you would describe the locations, the surroundings, and the tensions between characters. In new media writing works, they tend to build elements via multimodality, which is the use of the 5 different modes of communication. So instead of just the linguistic, the print text, they will also utilize the visual mode, which can be everything from color to icons to moving and visual images. The audio mode, such as ambient music or background noises, as well as feedback noises, such as the thunk of a mouse when you select the wrong action. Spatial communication, which is the grouping of elements within a space. As an example from this slide, you can tell that the different modes of communication are all related because they're grouped together and shaped quite similarly. And then there's also gestural communication, which is, in physical terms, something as simple as the wave of a hand. On the computer, however, it tends to be the way that the user interacts, the swipe between pages or the click of a button. So with all of this in mind, and with my approach taken, what did the collection look like? Well, firstly, 33 works had passing captures and 43 works had failing captures, which feels like an overly negative outcome for how much work was put into the collection. But if we look at the reasons behind this, we'll find it's not that grim. Firstly, the leading cause for capture failure was incomplete narrative. And in many cases, this is as simply fixed as doing a recrawl and targeting one asset or one missing page. So the majority of these will have passing captures after recrawl. The second lead reason for capture failure was actually not related to the captures at all. The W3 Act platform, the annotation curation tool, had an error where with certain works, it would start rewriting the code as it opened them, which made them unviewable. But on investigation, it was found that later versions of the platform, the beta versions, will be able to display these works without any issues. So hopefully all 13 of these works will have passing captures when the next platform release happens. And the final 9 had obsolete media players. This was touched on by Giulia earlier, as Ruffle is needed now to play Adobe Flashworks, which makes up a large proportion of very early new media writing. After this, we've got the ability to recrawl, and of these failed works, 16 should be able to be recrawled and become passing captures. It's really that easy, and doing so will bring us up to a total of 49 works with passing captures. If all of the W3 Act rewrite error captures are also of a good standing when the next release happens, we can bolster that to 62 works out of 78. And that doesn't begin to touch on emulation. So what are the next steps? As part of my placement, I did create a document with recommendations. And these, as I've already said, involve further recrawls, not just of failing captures, but of passing ones as well to polish them off, emulator inclusion, and I also advised best practice guidelines. This has been done before in the digital literature community with the Electronic Literature Organization releasing acid-free bits and born-again bits. But this happened about a decade ago now. And in the technology world, that is a large amount of time to pass. So for the No Media Writing Prize, I'd suggest guidelines of internal file hosting. And by internal, I mean personal file hosting on a site that the author can control. Then I would recommend duplication of hosting instances. This is where they could be placed onto third-party sites like itch.io. This means that a copy remains out there even if the first fails, and there will be an accessible copy for the archive, as itch.io changed its hot linking policies in June of 2020, so they can no longer be crawled by a lot of web crawlers. The inclusion of site maps for larger sites is also recommended, as this will help with reconstruction of the site on the archive end. And the use of open source systems to create the works is highly recommended, as it won't end with a turnout like with Adobe Flash, where a lot of works were lost in a short space of time as the corporation decided it was no longer monetarily feasible to continue using the software. And now I'll turn back to Giulia, as she's got something to say about contextual information.
Thank you, Tegan. So yes, we are also interested in the contextual information that there is around a publication, which is the kind of descriptive material that can give a sense of the original look and feel of a publication, but also helps with kind of clarifying authorial intent and context, as well as provide instructions on use, especially when a specific type of tech becomes obsolete. And it can include things like press kits and promotional material, web pages like the publisher website, or reviews, for example, but also video captures from use of the publication and interviews with the authors. And this variety of material types can be produced by the publisher or by user, or even by the collecting institution. It helps document what we have and what we're missing, but also fill in the gaps for what we couldn't collect. And the UK legal deposit libraries are now in the scoping phase of a contextual information pilot project to test out a collection matrix for contextual information, specifically around emerging formats. So thank you very much for listening. That's all from us, and see you at a Q&A session.